What's up guys? In today's video, I'm gonna show you one of the best guards to play for BJJ beginners. Today we're gonna cover clamp guard, all the problems you'll run into along the way, and a few games to play to build your skills. Let's get started. All right guys, let's get started by entering the clamp guard from a closed guard situation. The first thing I need to do is break my opponent's posture. If their hands are high up on my chest, I'm gonna swim to the inside and I'm going to kick his hands off my body as I pull him into the pocket. From here, I already have inside position, so I'm gonna grab a collar tie with one hand and a bicep tie with the other. As I do this, I wanna shift my hips out towards my collar tie side. This is gonna give me the space to begin pulling my knees to my chest. The first thing I'm looking to do is bring one shin to the inside of my bicep tie. Now I have a frame with my shin and the bicep tie pulling him towards that frame. With the other knee, I'm gonna pull it up and over his back to break his posture further, and I'm gonna look to touch my heel to my other knee. This is the entry into my clamp guard. Now, if my opponent's hands are a little bit lower, I'm not going to be able to swim to the inside, so instead I'm gonna grab both elbows, flaring them, and then pulling him into the pocket. Once I get here, I'm again looking for my collar tie, my tricep control, and then I'm looking to enter my clamp guard. Now another position I can enter the clamp guard from is this knee shield. As I get my knee shield engaged, my opponent will likely post on my hip, so I'm gonna grab that tricep just above the elbow, and I'm gonna begin to flare it out. Again, I'm gonna use my legs to pull my opponent into the pocket. So I pull him tight as I get here. Now, once I get here, I'm gonna control the head, controlling his posture, and control the far side arm. Now, in order to finalize this clamp guard, I'm gonna have to kick my knee shield through, pull both my knees to my chest, and then lock up my clamp guard. Now the benefits of this clamp guard are twofold. For one, I have really good control over the inside position. I have my whole shin as a frame to the inside of his shoulder, which makes it difficult for him to utilize this arm. For two, I have great control over my opponent's posture. I have my legs over his shoulders, which means I can control them with my legs instead of my arms. This is a huge benefit against larger opponents. Now, in order to keep this position tight, I need to keep my heel tight towards my own shin. If this starts falling over his back, he's gonna be able to poke that shoulder up and destroy the position. So in order to keep this heel tight, I'm pinching my knees together and pulling my heel down towards my butt. Another bit of added leverage is if I reach around and I hug my own thigh. This is gonna help reinforce my top leg against his posture. Now from here, I have great control and I can continue to work. Now that we've entered the clamp guard, it's time to attack. So I'm gonna begin by looking for a reverse triangle. To get to this reverse triangle, I need to gather control over his far wrist. Once I get here, I begin to extend my bottom leg into the pit of his elbow, which opens the space to lace my top foot to the inside of his shoulder. As I do that, it goes beneath my bottom leg and I can look to lock my legs in a figure four. After I get this figure four, I can certainly try to squeeze to finish, but typically I'm gonna go for joint locks instead. I have such good control over his shoulders that his arm is extremely isolated. So from here, I'm gonna look for a Kimura first. So I begin by sliding my top arm back and finding the wrist. Now, instead of locking up my grip right away, it's pretty awkward, I'm just going to drive his wrist below my hip line. Once I get here, against some opponents, I can simply drive this wrist a bit further and get the tap. Against tough opponents, you might need to lace your traditional Kimura grip, going under and grabbing your own wrist, and then using your back muscles, pulling to finish. Now, if I get into this reverse triangle and I'm looking for the Kimura, but my opponent straightens his arm, I'm gonna switch to an armbar instead. So as I get here, I notice his arm is straightened out. I'm going to cup his elbow with my top hand, keeping it controlled, and then I'm gonna dig for an underhook with my far arm. Once I get underneath his arm, I can use both my hands to pop his wrist up onto my shoulder. Now, as you notice, I'm gonna turn to face the wall to build a pit to hug that wrist into. Once I get here, I need to expose his elbow to the braking pressure by rotating it to face that direction. So the easiest way to do this is by grabbing with your bottom hand just over the pit of the elbow and pulling your elbow tight to your gut to rotate. Now that I have his arm in position, I'm gonna reinforce with my secondary hand, I'm gonna hollow out my gut, and I'm gonna bow to finish. If you want to build better BJJ faster, click here for 30 days and 30 ways to train smarter. Now, as we look for this reverse triangle, our opponent may not like the tension on his shoulder, and he may decide to swim the wrist underneath my locking leg. Now, once my opponent gets his arm underneath my lock, I'm gonna switch to a traditional triangle. Now, in order to switch to this traditional triangle, I don't wanna totally disassemble my legs because he'll be able to escape in the process. And so instead, I'm gonna switch my lock in stages. The first stage is going to be sliding down to an ankle-to-ankle connection. Now I keep my legs locking over his spine, continuing to break his posture. Now from here, I hug his upper body and quickly switch my ankle connection to the other side. Now I'm in position to lock up my triangle. So I extend my legs out and slide my lock down. Now, in order to finish this triangle choke, I need to cover this shoulder that's stuck in the pocket. If this shoulder stays exposed, he can flex his lats and open the window to avoid the choke. Now, in order to cover this shoulder, I need to get this arm out of the way. One way I can do that is by grabbing the wrist with both hands, extending my hips up for a split second, and pulling it across. Once it's across, I pull him back down into the pocket and recover posture control. Now, once the arm is across, it's very easy to cover this shoulder. All I need to do is get an angle. So I can reach my far arm, either under his arm or under his leg, and I can use it to pull myself out at an angle. Now, in order to finish this choke, most people think about a squeeze of the legs. It's more like a scissor kick. What I'm really doing is pulling my bottom knee towards my chest as I kick my top leg out against that pressure. The lock is just here to facilitate that process. So I squeeze, I kick, and I finish. Now, as you look for this triangle, your opponent may use this inside arm as a frame to make space and build posture. In this case, instead of fighting for the triangle, I'm just gonna armbar the arm he leaves behind. So I'm gonna grab the wrist with both hands, I'm gonna use my top leg chopping down to help elevate my hips, and then I can throw my bottom leg over his neck, pinching my knees tight. Make sure you're back heeling this entire time to keep his posture broken. Now, to finish this arm lock is super simple. I'm just going to slowly hip in against his elbow to finish. Now, as I get to my clamp guard, a very common response is for my opponent to grab my bottom foot. Now, in this case, I could certainly try to strip his grip and recover position, but sometimes it's not worth it. So instead, I'm gonna use my top leg to attack the arm he left behind. Now, I'll be looking for an omoplata to do this. In order to get my omoplata, I'm first gonna hug this top leg tight, keeping his posture broken, and then I'm gonna use my bottom arm as a frame against his neck. Now, if you can simply throw this foot over his face, that's great. If you need a little bit of help because of tight hips, I recommend reaching under your own shin and pulling it across with your hand. Now from here, I'm gonna look to kick through and sit up. I don't want his arm disappearing as I do, so I'm gonna cup it with my top arm. Now I can kick through, sitting up and putting pressure down over the shoulder. Now in order to keep this pressure heavy, I'm gonna cut my leg to the inside. As I do this, I switch my hands, 1, 2. This hip grip is gonna prevent him from rolling through and relieving pressure. Now, in order to finish this omoplata, I wanna break his base down further, so I'm gonna keep my grips tight and I'm gonna hop away from his shoulder. This is gonna help break him down. Now, in order to get the finish, I don't wanna rise up, creating space. I instead wanna roll directly through this shoulder, keeping weight heavy as I do. So I roll forward and through. Now in a no-gi context, as I attack this omoplata, my opponent is typically gonna roll through. So I wanna get used to that and be ready to sweep as he does. So as I kick through, I'm expecting him to roll. I keep the arm controlled as he does, and then I'm going to look to gain top position. So I'm gonna switch hands, posting up as I do, and I'm gonna look to get up to my knees. Now I could keep this arm stuck in the pocket, but if I wanna gain control, I'm simply gonna kick it out, freeing his arm, and taking top position. All right, guys, now it's time to play some games to build your skills. This first game is all about building confidence in your submissions. So I'm going to start in a reverse triangle, locked nice and tight, and I'm gonna win by submission. It doesn't matter if it's an arm lock, a choke, even a transition to a regular triangle. I'm gonna win through that submission. Now, if my opponent is able to disassemble this lock and escape position, I lose. This next game is all about progressing from the clamp position. So I'm gonna begin in a full clamp position with both legs in place and control over their posture. I win by progressing to either a reverse triangle or a regular triangle. No subs allowed. My opponent wins by breaking this apart and posturing up. All right, guys, now this last game is all about building the position of the clamp guard. I'm gonna begin in closed guard with no posture control, and I win by making it to clamp guard for 3 seconds. My opponent wins by denying the clamp guard and breaking free from my closed guard. Thanks for watching. Click here for 30 days and 30 ways to train smarter, and click here for another video YouTube thinks you'll love.